Hello and welcome. I'm Patrick Curtis, your host and chief monkey, and this is the Wall Street Oasis podcast. Join me as I talk to some of the community's most successful and inspirational members to gain valuable insight into different career paths and life in general. Let's get to it. In this episode, member Rogue Pogue Monkey, that's Rogue_Pogue_Monkey, shares his story from making it to the Big Four, the struggles of passing the CPA, and how he got promoted. Learn why everything changed, why he decided to join the Army, and what happened when he collided into the parachute of another officer at 900 feet. Enjoy. All right, Rogue Pogue Monkey, thank you so much for joining the Wall Street Oasis podcast.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, just real quick, if you could just give the listeners a little bit of background about yourself.
Sure. So I'm originally from the DC area. My background when I started in college is in accounting. I joined a Big Four firm immediately out of my undergrad program. And from there, did a little bit of tax, a little bit of advisory. Being that it was in DC, the advisory was federally oriented. From there, I had the opportunity to take the CPA. The CPA was a very, very interesting part of my life. It was very challenging. And it was at that point, because of that challenge, that I kind of asked myself, hey, what else can I do, right? That led me to make a very interesting decision that my peers were very shocked about. I actually ended up joining the Army as an officer. So I've been a logistics officer now for the past 3.5 years or so. And with that, I actually am coming now to the close of that phase. And I'm starting my next phase, which is entering a top 10 MBA program, which I'm very, very excited to start.
Congrats, man. That's a huge relief to get into a good school and to be having that next chapter, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah, it was, the whole GMAT, GRE discussion and, do I have a chance here and there? I'm so happy that that's in the past.
For sure. Cool. Well, thanks for giving us that little overview. I guess real quick, can you talk to me a little bit about, your undergrad, kind of what made you decide to go there? I know you majored in accounting. Can you talk about that idea and like what influenced you to make those decisions? Is something you enjoyed or you felt like, hey, this is going to give me a decent career?
Sure. To be honest, I think it is with the latter. I'm a first generation American. My parents are from Mexico. So I was kind of a guinea pig in the school system, right? Mm-hmm. They had no idea, and me neither, right? So as I was going through the motions, I really wanted to make an impact with my choice, right? I wanted it to be something that my brothers could look up to and hopefully be inspired to, maybe go to school themselves. And at the same time, this was, during the recession. So I needed something that, was going to pay at the end of the day. And so accounting to me, it just kind of naturally fell, into my lane. I was in a class one day and we were having a discussion about debits and credits. 99% of the class was like, what the hell is a debit and what's a credit? And I was like, that makes sense to me. So when I saw it, I was like, you know what, I'm just going to keep plugging away. And it worked out for me. And, I understood it from day one. And I had a successful career, to be quite honest, in accounting. It's just, life happens, right?
Yeah, for sure. So do you feel like when you were at that school, you were majoring in accounting, you're doing well, I assume, or decently well enough to land at a Big Four? Can you tell me a little bit about that recruiting process? What made you think, okay, I want to go Big Four? Was it something that, your school kind of tried to push you into? Were they recruiting you heavily, or were you having to network a lot?
So I think it was a little bit of network and the school kind of laying it out, especially a professor. He kind of laid it out to us that, you want to be aiming for the Big Four. And again, I really wanted to maximize, right, the potential of my decision, right? So when I heard, hey, Big Four is where you want to go, I immediately targeted that, right? And I was like, hey, let's just, that's where we're going. And I networked my ass off, I went to Deloitte, KPMG, EY, all of them, all the events. And it's really,
were those
really
on campus?
process.
Were those on campus events, or did you have to go somewhere else?
It was a mix of both on campus and also kind of like in their office area, maybe a local bar, local restaurant.
Okay.
And, you know, again, this was being the first month I was doing this, I had really no idea what I was getting into, like why you network, how you network. So initially, you know, I was a little bit out of my element. You know, there's some individuals who their fathers happen to be partners, or, you know, they were very comfortable here. So for me, I was definitely fish out of water. So it was very eye-opening. It was my introduction to you know, corporate America, if you will. And
did you
from
have
there,
did you own a suit at that point, or you had to go buy a suit? Right?
You know what's funny? I bought a suit from Burlington Coat Factory.
Nice.
I did not have a suit. I had nothing in my you know, closet. Just a bunch of, you know, regular clothes. And my girlfriend at the time, my wife now, she's like, "Rob, you need to go buy something." So, you know, we went out to Burlington Coat Factory, had like a budget of like $50, and we just got the baggiest suit. We just made it happen.
It's all good. It's all good. Did you get it tailored, or did you not even know to get it tailored?
Absolutely not.
Yeah,
I was like, I think this is good enough. I didn't even know the measurement. Like, we just sent it. You know what I mean?
I'm sure. I'm sure. No, that's great. So yeah, that's good to know. So you're kind of doing these networking events. You're, you know, you're meeting some good people. You kind of start getting more comfortable, or like, did it take you a long time to kind of get comfortable in that setting, like where you're at the bar, like chatting with partners and stuff like that?
You know, it was actually quite easy to get comfortable. I'm a very outgoing person. So I just, you know, initially I'm intimidated by the fact that this is a job that I'm trying to target. But to be honest, once I met a few people, I was like, hey, there's a lot that we have in common. We just, you know, let's talk about that. So it was really quite natural for me to get comfortable and just, you know, grab a beer and start chatting people up.
Nice. And so you're going through that. It seems like you're making some good connections. Where you ended up eventually, was that from a direct connection that you made from one of these chats, or was it just, you know, did you end up getting another job through some other channel?
No, you know what? It's funny. Like, you network so much, and this happened just, this was an opportunity that came through on-campus recruiting. Had nothing to do with the networking event. However, networking events did help me build my, you know, my conversation skills, my story, and all those intangibles, right, that you want to present in an interview. And it just kind of, it helps you be more relaxed, right? So although it had nothing to do with the networking, I think that all, it completed me, you know,
you're like a more polished interviewer by that point, where
absolutely,
you're coming in there, you knew your story down, you knew why you wanted to do this and whatnot. And so what did you, like, when they were like, hey, why accounting? Why, you know, why us? Did you have to like did you have like a different story for each big four firm, or did they not even ask you that?
Yeah, you know, you know, those questions are always interesting, but you know, you actually, you have to dig down a little bit, right? And even back then, I understood the value of culture, so I did try to extrapolate a little bit of, hey, you know, what culture are these firms, you know, conveying, and what culture actually exists, you know, behind these offices. So I did do a little bit of my homework, and I was able to use that as my anchor for, you know, why us.
Nice. Sounds like you were kind of polished. Did you do a lot of mock interviews before kind of having these rounds, or did you kind of just wing it at first and get better as you went along?
Yeah, the latter. Absolutely did not do any interview prep.
Come on, man. Come on. No, just kidding. So anyway, so you graduate in 2012. You get that job. Did you had an internship, it looks like, for a full year before? Was it like while you were at school, you were doing an internship? Is that normal?
Right.
Do you know if that's normal for the Big Four?
No, it is not normal.
Okay.
Well, no, it's not normal. And actually, I started in the winter. Again, I was in tax, right? So a normal tax internship, I would say, would last from, you know, January through either April or May, because of, you know, the tax deadline. So for me, you know, I have like a lot of, you know, drive in what I'm doing, right? So I really took the opportunity, and I just, you know, I'm trying to hit home runs, to be quite honest, right?
Yeah.
So every opportunity I can to excel, I'm taking it, right? I'm not kissing ass, because I really do hate that, but I'm making it happen, right? So
putting your head down, making sure that people have a good impression of you. This kid's a hard worker, that type of thing.
Correct.
Yep.
Exactly. Right.
Okay.
So March comes around, and my supervisor, hey, the deadline's coming up, but we really want to keep you around because there's a lot of work, and you really, you'll be doing a great job for us. So they extended me from a typical April type of deadline all the way out through, I believe it was November.
Wow.
November, October. So I was able to work there, and it was actually great because I was getting married that summer.
Mm-hmm.
My girlfriend and I, we were just, hey, you're the one. She's like, yeah, you're the one too. I was like, hey, man, let's just get married. So that the cash was definitely helpful at the time, and it just worked out well.
Weddings are expensive, man. It's crazy.
Oh yeah, and we paid out of pocket.
Nice.
We didn't.
No
we
debt.
didn't get
No
a huge
debt.
debt or anything like that. We just did ourselves.
Yeah, anyone getting married, don't go into debt.
Oh God, no.
Anyway, so you're
getting married. Think about it.
Anyway, so you're about to, you basically kind of develop this relationship with the tax team, I assume, and so they immediately want you back, I assume, when you graduate the next year. Is that
Yeah, exactly. So, I started in an off year.
Mm-hmm.
So I started in, I think, January in my schooling at least. So I ended up graduating in December. So a month or two after I was done with the internship. So literally 2 months later, I'm back at it again. But now I have a full-time offer. I'm an associate.
Got it. Okay. And then can you tell me about your path there? Any advice for other people looking to target the Big Four besides just being a little polished and interview, doing the networking and all that? Anything once you get to the job in your seat, what to do?
Sure. The Big Four is the Big Four for a reason, right? They have great clients, and they have, tremendous experience to be, learned via these engagements, right? But that comes with the reality that they're there to work, right? And yes, they have free food at 6, 7, or however late you want to stay. But just go into these conversations or go into this potential lifestyle with an understanding that you're going to grind, right? It's not just a great name for nothing. So you're going to go in there and grind. So expect to grind, but in a positive way, right? It doesn't mean it's a toxic environment. It's just expect to work. I know, and I say that because I had some co-interns and then other, people that were hired with me that they really didn't understand what they were getting into.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I came out guns blazing. I was like, hey, whatever you get, you throw my way, I'm going to knock it out, right? So I was very aggressive in that regard. So other individuals didn't really understand that busy season, there's some longer hours that you may have to work. So they came actually as a shock to some of my peers. So just understand the culture of the workplace that you're getting into and what they require from you to succeed.
It sounds like you had the right attitude going in as, right out of undergrad. Is that kind of what played into your transition from tax to being able to transition? It looks like you transitioned to advisory. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
Do you think that had to play into it, or is it you had a couple of years of tax, they were cool with you moving on, or how did you kind of navigate that? Because I know it can be super touchy, right?
Oh God, yeah.
Yeah. So can you talk a little bit about that?
I'm laughing because it's such a memorable experience for me.
Yeah.
So the reason I rotated out of tax and into advisory is because somehow, I don't know how my performance was tracked, but somebody caught wind that, there were some good performers. So it was me and other individuals as well. So they, kind of invited us for I don't want to say secret, but it was not an official event, right? And they were just kind of letting us know about these opportunities.
They're stealing you. They're stealing the best tax people. All right, yeah. So go ahead.
So they planted the seed, right? And I'm like, you know what? I love what I'm doing, but I'm here to learn. I'm here to grow. And that's really, a theme that you may see. I love growing. Mm-hmm. So I saw that as an opportunity to grow, and sat on it for a few days. I was like, I have really great traction here. I had actually just received an offer to move to an office in South Carolina, I believe, mm-hmm. Because there was a new business development there for tax. So, I had positive relationships, but I ended up doing the advisory route because I wanted to, one, put myself in a different scenario, learn from that, new environment. Mm-hmm. So, I went with it. So what do? Being naive, I don't really understand that, this could be a problem and that I'm essentially being poached. Now I know.
Yeah.
I go to my direct supervisor, who's a manager at the time, and I'm like, hey, check it out. I think I want to move to advisory. Is that cool with you?
Oh, boy.
And she's like, what do you mean? And I'm like, yeah, how the firm supports rotations. I think I'm going to do that. And
oh, you naive 24-year-old or whatever you were. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, go ahead.
And she was like, yeah, let me bring this up to the partner. Right? Partner gets involved, pulls me into the office, and that becomes an interesting conversation. And it's like, hey, what do we need to do to keep you? And I'm like, hey, it has nothing to do with money. It has nothing to do with you. It's not you, it's me, right?
Right.
I'm just trying to, seek other opportunities, learn something new. And it got really, really heated, that conversation, to the point that a third party needed to get involved to hold these discussions, because it was getting to the point where my move was essentially potentially could have been sabotaged just because they didn't want to let me go, right?
Wow.
And yes, it could have been great for that department, but what about me, right? You're just going to keep me, and then these are positions that get filled on a rolling basis. So I had an opportunity back then. 6 months later, 8 months later, it may not be there anymore. So now what, right?
Yeah.
So that was really interesting. Obviously,
so you guys don't you get third party involved. You don't necessarily want to get HR involved because it gets ugly. But
right,
you had enough
not.
support from the advisory side. They were like, look, just let them come over, kind of thing,
yes.
And it was okay because you had that support.
Absolutely.
From the other side. Okay.
Yeah. So actually, the first thing that the tax guy says is like, you know what? Don't say anything about this discussion to anybody. And I'm like, that's a red flag.
Yeah.
Okay. What's the first thing I do? I go to the advisory partner. I'm like, hey man, check it out. I'm trying to move here, but I'm getting a little bit of friction over there. What can we do? Yeah. And essentially, the partners got involved and they talked it out. Got it.
Yeah, and that makes sense. So okay, so you get there. What's going on with this? Are you learning a lot more, or is it you back kind of you only learned for the first few months and you feel like you're stuck again, or do you actually enjoy it?
No, I actually enjoyed it. It was it was a huge engagement. It was it wasn't Exxon, but it was like an Exxon type corporation, like that much money and that much of a business presence, right?
Yep.
So there's like a lot of information there from an accounting perspective, financial reporting perspective, and I'm understanding now, internal facing issues and external facing issues. I'm just, I'm super excited to be there. And I was working maybe for like 8 months, and I get tapped to become a team lead. I get promoted to be senior associate as well at that point. So I'm really thriving in this environment. And it's also during this time that I saw that, you need to get a CPA, your CPA certification to make it in the Big Four, right? Mm-hmm. Yes, you can survive the first few years, but if you don't have your CPA, it's kind of be like, hey, what are you doing, right? You're not going to move on, right? You're not going to progress in your career. So I was like, hey, I got to sit for the CPA. Crazy hours, but you got to make it happen. So that's at that point that I sat for the CPA. And
so that was that was as soon as you were promoted to senior associate. So what did you say, 6 months in, that you started kind of saying, okay, now I need if I want to keep going up, I got to get that CPA. So you started studying.
Yeah, right before I got promoted to senior associate, I kind of saw it coming.
Okay.
And at the time I was, I guess you could say, I'll be honest, I was a little ashamed that it took me so long to pass the CPA exam. It's a crazy exam. Mm-hmm. But now, I'm proud of it. It's part of my story. In total, it did take me 18 months to finish the exam, just because I had to balance, the wife at home, I had to balance work priorities and long days. And then you got to figure out somewhere you're going to study for this crazy exam. Some of my peers who already had their license had studied like the summer before even starting at the Big Four. And I was like, yeah, totally did not see that coming back then. Yeah. So I guess side note, study for this damn exam before you even get started with your career.
Yeah. Cause if you're already working full time, and if you're a grinder, like you are, you're probably getting a lot of responsibility. It's going to be even harder because they're going to lean on you more, and it's good to get promoted. It's good to get promoted, but it can put a cap on how high up you go. Right.
Absolutely.
Cool. Yeah, man. So, okay. So looks like you're you eventually pass the CP, you get your CPA, right? After 18
Yep.
months. And then it sounds like you're, going to continue to climb and get up to manager and senior manager and eventually partner. And you're kind of riding the Big Four wave, and then all of a sudden everything changes. Tell me about that.
Right. So, the CPA process was long, right? I failed the financial section of the exam, not once, but twice, right? So the first time you fail it, it's like, all right, I saw that coming. It's a CPA, right?
Right.
The second time I fail, I'm like, man, this sucks. I've been studying now for essentially like 120 days or something. What am I doing? What am I doing wrong? Am I really going to continue investing time in this? So I take a step back, right? And I fix my act, and I do eventually pass the CPA. So at the end of that 18-month journey,
but what do you think? What do you think was the difference on that third time?
I truly did focus on my weaknesses, and all the ego, I left it at the door, and I was like, hey, okay, what do you need? Where are you failing? Right.
Right.
And I needed to be real with myself and stop pretending that I'm smart. And it's like, obviously, yes, you're confident, you're smart, but something's not clicking. So it takes a lot to really focus on those weaknesses and just be honest with yourself. Right.
Okay,
this is what you need to do.
Cool. Okay. So continue. Thank you.
Right. So at the end of this journey, I'm like thinking there's going to be this awesome finish line with a CPA trophy or something. And, there's nothing. Like, okay, you passed the damn exam, continue working. Right. So, but, I gave myself permission to take a knee and kind of just think about what I was doing, what I had done. And, back then, what I considered good resiliency was, picking myself up after those two failures and finish the exam. And I ended up passing all 4 sections consecutively. So I was like, man, I just passed that. That's good. I have something, I have some kind of heart, right? Has to count for something. So I'm thinking about where I'm at in life, to be honest. I'm having like a 20s midlife crisis.
Yep.
And I'm like, what am I doing with my life? Where am I going? Where do I come from? Right. So I mentioned earlier that
by the way, which is very normal, mid-20s, quarter life crisis or whatever you want to call it.
Is that right?
Yeah, it's super normal, man. I mean, I think a lot of bankers, people in the Big Four, accountants that, you get out of school, you put in those first few years, and then you're kind of like, okay, now what?
Exactly.
So yeah, go ahead.
So, I mentioned earlier, I'm the first in my family to go to school. So my parents, they came from Mexico, and eventually, my dad started a small business, and he did well for himself, but he did have a cap in his earning potential. So now I see where I'm at, and I see that my earning potential is just so much different than his, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I do mean that in a good way, because that's what he wanted.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, it's making me feel some type of way. And I remember while I was studying, there was a pamphlet about becoming an Army officer. And I saw the pamphlet, and I was like, that's not for me. I self-selected out immediately, right? I was like, I'm a Big Four dude. Like you said, I'm going to ride the wave, and I'm going to maybe become partner. We'll see. But then I kind of got a little frustrated at myself that I did self-select out. And I was like, it was so easy for me to say that lifestyle was not for me, because it's like, well, why not, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I pick up the pamphlet again. I start reading through it. Right? Army officers, this is what you do. This is how you lead. And, and I'm buying into the propaganda, right? I'm like, yeah, whatever. We'll see what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And, in the mix of all those emotions I'm feeling about where my father is, where I'm at, eventually I arrived to the decision that I would love the opportunity to serve my country and kind of pay back this opportunity that the country has given us. My father came from nothing. He created something, and now I created a little bit more. My brothers will hopefully create a little bit more. And, he trickles on, right?
Mm-hmm.
The cliche American dream.
Yeah.
So, I'm a very analytical person coming from the Big Four, obviously. Mm-hmm. But this one time in my life, I go with a gut decision. And I walk down to the recruiter's office, and I'm like, hey, man, how do I get into the Army? How do I become an Army officer? And it was funny. We were chatting, but there was another person behind him. He was like in a regular chair, and very, like in a movie or something, he slowly turns his chair around. And I don't know if you've ever seen people dip. They have like a plastic bottle, and it's like
Yeah, he's dipping.
So
Yeah.
he turns really slowly, and he's like, why the hell do you want to join my army? Why do you think you can join my army? Right? I'm like, I don't know. Your pamphlet was pretty dope. I don't know. It's just something about leading. So, but it did bother me. I was like, well, why do I want to join? Right? And I created, eventually this. Or not created, but I arrived at this conclusion. That's really what was drawing me. And then, 6-8 months later, after losing a bunch of weight, after running God knows how many miles, I found myself down in Fort Benning, Georgia, and I'm getting screamed at by a drill sergeant, and I'm just like, what the hell is going on? So
let's back up a little bit there. You said
experience.
Back up a little bit there. So you're at the Big Four. You kind of like at the CPA almost like seemed like a change, like a turning point where like you wanted, like you said, you took a knee, you thought about it. But then you said you read the pamphlet, you kind of were frustrated that you had self-selected, so you went back to it. Was there anybody like in your ear at that point being like, what are you doing? Were you sharing your thoughts with anybody, or were you just kind of in your own head?
I'm actually a very private person, so it's kind of interesting I'm doing this podcast, but
yeah,
the only person that I really ask for the feedback is my wife, right? She's kind of like, she guides me through everything, and I try to guide her. So that's the only person I had really been going back and forth with. Other than that, I had hinted at the idea that I was going to join the Army, but
yeah. What did your family say?
Hey,
what did your wife say? What did your family say?
Oh, my wife she was down. She was like, hey, is this something you want to do? And I'm like, absolutely. So she was like, all right, let's make it happen. You need to create a schedule. You need to run. So she was like my coach. You know what I mean?
That's awesome.
She was like, let me see your push-ups. And I'm like, here's 5. She's like, wow, that sucked. You need to do more push-ups. So she was super supportive. But my buddies, my coworkers, they were kind of shocked. They were like, why are you doing this? Like, are you like, you're like in a good position right now. What are you doing? And I was like, hey man, I try to explain to them, but it's just something that if you don't feel it, like it's okay, but it's just something you just got to do with what you're feeling at the time.
I hear you. And I think there was some sort of draw. Maybe it was want to become a better leader, kind of search and challenge yourself. Was there a little bit of that in there?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, it was so many factors, right? I named the biggest factor, which was, paying it back. But that was absolutely one of the biggest things is like, or another big thing, challenge myself. What can I do, right? I'm coming off of the heels of the CPA, which at the time was my biggest obstacle. And now I'm like, well, what else can I do? Right. What other challenges can I overcome? And how resilient, am I really?
Interesting. So you decide on the Army. Is that just because the pamphlet was there? What if it had been the Navy or the Marines or something like that? Would you have gone there?
Go Army, beat Navy, right? No, at the time I had been working, so some of the advisory work had, deals with the government. So some of my client counterparts happened to be flag officers. So I had experienced some of the leadership that they brought to the table, some of that confidence that they just commanded. And I was like, that's pretty cool. Like, I like that. I was attracted to that. Yeah. Had I been with a Navy client, maybe I would have, gone that route as well. It just so happened to be that's what I was exposed to.
So tell me a little bit about specifically when you've already had a few years of work experience and coming in as an officer. What does that mean? I'm not so, I've never been in the military, and I'd love to hear just specifically like, officer versus lieutenant versus all this other stuff. I'd just give a quick
right.
Kind of
so
summary.
Usually officers, I'm not going to say usually, the majority of officers come directly from a college program. So they're maybe like 23 or 24 years of age, right?
Yep.
And they're coming from either West Point, right, the U.S. Military Academy, or through, any university, right? Whatever university will have most likely will have an ROTC program, and they'll come out of that program.
Got it. Yep.
I went a different route. I went through officer candidate school, which is essentially from, in 6 months, essentially, they will develop you and they will cram 4 years of that West Point academia into 6 months, and they're like, you will be an officer whether you like it or not. So it's like, all right, let's make it happen. So
but is that while you're getting screamed at, you're also doing a lot of academic? Is it like academically heavy, or is it like leadership heavy? What's that kind of? What's that about?
So it's broken down into 2 phases. The first phase, you go through basic combat training or, Marine Corps boot camp.
Yep.
Essentially, you get in shape. The second phase is more academic and leadership driven. And it's also commingled with physical obstacles. So like you still, you have to ruck, 12 miles with approximately 60 pounds on your back. You have to run 5, 7 miles, et cetera, et cetera. So there's still physical challenges. Hopefully the first phase built you up to the physical challenge so that now you can focus on, what it means to be an officer.
Got it. Yeah.
Yeah. So, hopefully the first phase, like I said, it builds you up for phase 2 physical readiness, because phase 2 is heavy on doctrine, what it means to be an officer, how to lead, et cetera, et cetera. So, you mentioned earlier coming in as essentially, big 4 dude, right? I am 27, right?
Yep.
The average age for an officer to start is maybe 23, 24. I'm 27. I think the average age of my class was 25. So I'm a little older than these guys. So I'm more mature. I've been in the professional world now, and I know how to think differently, at least. Or I shouldn't say I know, but I've been exposed to different things, so I think differently, right?
Right.
So it was very interesting to see. I thought I was going to be in a new environment, and yes, I was in a new environment, but I was very surprised to see how transferable some of the skills that I picked up in the Big 4, made it over and made my job in life just that much easier. Data analytics, or, how to break down a process into several phases or what have you. They don't necessarily teach you this to become an officer, but these are skills that you absolutely need to have to be a successful leader. So, unbeknownst to me, I already had some of these, so that was really good.
Nice. And so that just made like the assignments they gave you that much easier. Like when you had to lead a team or whatever, you could develop the processes and whatnot needed. Is that what you mean?
Absolutely. Yeah. So
okay.
I went into logistics, right? And I went to logistics, very, knowing, like I knew what I wanted to do. Right? So disclaimer, I knew I was not going to make a career out of the Army, right? This is an experience I wanted to have. This is my way of saying, hey, thank you to the country, and this is what I'm giving back, right? So as an officer candidate, you have an active duty obligation of 3.5 to 4 years, right?
Yeah.
So I knew that at the end of the 4 years, I was going to separate from the Army. That being said, I chose logistics just because I had a little bit of understanding, right? It's kind of still business related,
right? But
at the same time, I wanted to understand why certain functions impacted accounting. I thought I was going to go back into accounting, but I'm not. So I wanted to see, how do certain functions, how do certain things that people do on the floor, if you will, impact the financials, even though the Army doesn't have the same financials, but, in that mindset.
So logistics is dealing with like the actual logistics of all the divisions and everything of the Army. Is that like, so you're helping them to, or is it logistics of a specific division?
Correct.
Which one?
Specific division.
Oh, okay. Specific division.
Or specific unit, I should say. So you'll have division level, brigade level, which is a little under, and then the battalion level is approximately like a battalion is 800 people. A brigade is like 3,000, 4,000 people.
Got it. Okay.
I was doing logistics for a battalion that is an 800 approximately size organization.
So when you say logistics, you give an example, like what the type of work you're doing.
Sure. So I was in an airborne battalion, meaning, we had to be trained in jumping out of airplanes effectively, I'll say. Know how to land on your ass really effectively. So our logistics was influenced by the fact that this is a battalion that focuses on airborne insertions, and it's actually interesting today, this week is the anniversary of D-Day and, the greatest operation in the history, right?
Yep.
So, our battalion does have history. They jumped into in the D-Day operation. So the logistics that we deal with are influenced because this battalion has to be ready to go within 18 hours, right? It wheels off en route to some country at the president's discretion, right? We are the 911 of the president, the 82nd Airborne Division. That's what we take pride in. So the logistics that we have, we have to be fast, we have to be agile, we have to be adaptable, whether that means, preparing for a jump with 500 paratroopers. That means you have to work backwards. 500 paratroopers requires X amount of parachutes,
Right.
X amount of supplies, X amount of equipment. So you either make an operation successful or you're part of the operation, and you're down on the ground and you're making the operation drive forward, right? And you're bringing all the materials and supplies to the fight to ensure that the fight is, succeeds.
Tell me about the tools. So, are the tools and the systems more advanced than like what you had at a KPMG, or do you feel like they're more integrated? Like, did you have specific software that would help you do all those logistics, or were you just like mostly like, I don't know, like Excel and sheets and stuff like that?
Right. So I was the Excel guru, right? In my time. But no, so the Army's actually going through this shift. They're using an SAP-enabled system.
Yep.
That covers everything from finance to HR to logistics-based transactions, right? So procurement, acquisition, what have you.
Got it.
So as a Big Four, auditor or tax personnel, whatever you want to call it, I didn't dabble with, industry-specific software. I was just Excel modeling everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they're using SAP-based, but I was able to transfer in what I knew from data modeling and from data analysis to pull data from this ERP system and really kind of create this bigger overlay of the problems and start segmenting problems and identifying problems and triaging and driving forward from there. So that's where my experience helped me leverage my, the systems that I had available better.
So did you feel like this was a good move for you? You're coming up near the end of your 4 years, right? So did you feel like you're going to go to your MBA, and do you feel like it was a positive experience? Do you feel like, oh my gosh, was it horrible during it, but now you're happy you're done? And what was your kind of feeling overall now that you're here?
Overall, I'm so glad I did it. I would do it again. It's the best experience I've had. With that said, there were days where you're like, what the hell am I doing here, right? There are days that is just, like we say, it's sucking. Whether you're on the field or, you're getting priorities thrown at you left and right. And you're like, wow, well, how do we get through this day?
What was your worst? So, what was your worst day? Were you jumping out of an airplane, or did you like those days?
I love jumping out of airplanes.
Okay.
But I'm not going to say it was my worst day, but it could have been my worst day. I technically could have died, but I don't look it back like as a negative thing. It's just like a funny story that happened.
Mm-hmm.
I'll try to sum it up really quick. It's just I exited the aircraft. My elbow hit the side of the aircraft that I shouldn't have done. Mm-hmm. And in doing so, it just initiated a chain of events that should have never happened. I get tangled up, or rather, my parachute gets tangled up. In doing so, I lose speed. My parachute deflates, inflates, deflates, inflates, and this descent. I end up landing on at 900 feet in the air. I land on somebody else's parachute, and he's like, "What the hell are you doing here?"
You're like, "Hold on to me."
I'm like, I'm asking myself that same question. What am I doing here?
And you're at 900 feet at that point?
Experience.
You're at 900 feet when you hit his parachute?
Yeah. So you exit an aircraft approximately 1,250 feet in the air. Immediately started with that,
you knew you were in trouble.
Yeah, but 900 feet approximately, I hit this guy on the way down. Between 900 and 700 feet, we managed to separate from each other. So at 600 feet, my parachute's still inflating, deflating. Finally, at 500-600 feet, it finally gets the air it needs. But, at that point, you're in the ground really quick. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I was just happy to see my parachute inflated. And, in retrospect, I should have pulled my reserve, but I didn't. I was like, hey, we're just going to ride this out.
Yeah, because I assume that's crazy, man. To pull your reserve, you probably have to let go of the main one, right? And then...
Exactly correct. So,
yeah, so you're like, it's kind of inflated. I only have 400 feet left, right?
Right, and it's funny because we go through these things all the time. It's hey, something has to just pop your reserve. But in the moment, the adrenaline was rushing, and I was talk about identifying a problem quickly. I have, typical jump is 1 minute.
Please
total.
Tell me you wrote about that. Must have been one of your essays for your MBA application.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So anyways, anything else you want to kind of give the listeners? I think you're going to do great at your program. I think you're going to love it. I went 10 years ago, but never regretted it. I think it was a great experience for me. I think you'll love it as well, especially coming from
Nice.
that background. I feel like you could use a little bit of a break.
Oh God, yes.
And business
I'm looking
school
forward to it.
is fun. You learn a lot, but it's also a lot of fun. So, real quick, anything else you want to share with the listeners before we call it? Any
You know
advice you'd
what?
give to your
I think
younger self? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I'll just say is that, looking back at my 7-ish years of a career or mix of careers that I've had, one thing that you just need to constantly ask yourself is, are you happy with the decision that you made, like in that moment? Are you growing? That's one of the things that I think if I'm not growing, what am I doing, right? So always ask yourself if you're growing, because the answer to that question is going to lead you to the next decision that hopefully will be a good decision for you.
That's great. We'll end it on that. I think it's great advice. I hope everyone that's listening actually follows it. So if you're growing, you're at least you're not stagnant. That's key. So hopefully you continue your
Absolutely.
journey, you continue to grow in your MBA program, and thanks for joining us. And thanks to you, my listeners at Wall Street Oasis. If you have any suggestions whatsoever, please don't hesitate to send them my way, patrick@wallstreetoasis.com. Until next time.